If it lets them begin to think about their marriage at least as much as they do their business, I think it would change their life. I sometimes see people who they try to take this big expensive trip or they buy a big expensive piece of jewelry for Christmas to make up for the year. And that's not what most of us want. Businesses often don't make it. Businesses will come and go. Maybe you sell it, maybe you start another one. But what you want as that consistent thread is that soft place to land, that partner, the person you fell in love with and envisioned a future together.
Welcome back to the show, Kathy. It's fantastic to have you back. I know that last time we got a little bit cut off by technology, which was a little bit of a shame because we were right in the middle of some really meaty discussions. So I invited you back on for part 2 so we can continue our discussions where we left off.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah, so much for having me back. I loved your interview the first time. You're a very easy person to talk to, so I love being back.
That is very kind. As I was just saying to before we jumped on the call, for me, this podcast is very much about, I figure if I want to ask the questions to find the answers, probably other people will want to as well. And I think it was just a really beautiful, natural chat around, what marriages and businesses have in common and some of the
Mhm.
mistakes we can make in both of them. So, for those who have not listened to the first podcast, I'd highly recommend that you do because we went through some quite significant things in that podcast, particularly around the similarities between business strategy and keeping a marriage alive, but also about that what happens with entrepreneurs a lot of the time is we get really really hooked up in our business and we forget about the marriage, the relationships outside of that. So I'm going to just ask you, Kathy, to kind of recap a little bit, just that we've got those things fresh in our mind again. So please, first of all, give us a quick synopsis of, who you are, how you got here, and then the CRAVE framework that you came up with and why that's important.
So I'm Kathy Rushing, relationship coach. I was a marriage and family therapist for many, many years and pivoted a few years ago to really focus on the intersection of marriage and entrepreneurship, business, other high achieving marriages. They all have a similar energy, and that is sometimes success at all costs, including their marriage. And I'm very passionate about healthy marriages, and I've worked with all kinds of marriages, but I especially love this cohort of entrepreneurs, visionaries, leaders. There's just an energy they bring. And I partly got into this because I've been married at this point 45 years to my serial entrepreneur husband, which we didn't know. I didn't know that word. I didn't know he was an entrepreneur. We started down a path as a pastor. And so more of that story was in our first discussion. But I realized, excuse me, at a point that we were really struggling. And it wasn't that our marriage was bad, it was just that we were both empty. He had been growing a business for over 12 years at that point. He was exhausted, I was exhausted, and that's just never a good place to be in marriage. And we had a good foundation, so we were able to get back on track pretty quickly. But it made me realize because when I started looking around, this was about 12 years ago, I couldn't find anything that talked about that intersection. And so I began to create resources and a podcast and a blog, and I've done some writing. And last year sometime, I came up with the CRAVE framework. CRAVE stands for communication, rituals and rhythms that connect, appreciation and affirmation, vision, where are we going together, and individually, because I think it's important that we don't lose ourselves in the process of growing our marriage or growing a business. And then E stands for energy. Without energy, we're not getting any work done. We have nothing left for our personal growth or the people in our lives. So I came up with that. I've been in the process of recording some audio content that I will be putting out hopefully by the end of October. And I just continue to create tools. I kind of listen for what people are wanting. Um, and I just I kind of keep beating the drum of just as every business has strategies, and you wouldn't think about starting a business without some sort of business plan, some sort of strategy, and it will change along the way. As the business grows, you need more resources. But for some reason with our marriage, our most important relationship, we think we can just set it on autopilot and let it run. And then we're puzzled when we don't, put fuel in the tank and suddenly it's out of gas. And we're shocked. We're like, I don't know. I didn't know there was a problem. So a lot of what I am very passionate about is giving couples tools to stay on track before there's a wide gap, because it's drift is kind of a natural process, I guess you could say, in a relationship. Like neutral is not part of a relationship. You're either growing together or you're drifting apart. But neutral doesn't really happen. So that drift can be very subtle. It's a little bit every day. Finally, after a year, it's like, gosh, something just feels different. I can't put my finger on it. And so a lot of what I talk about and write about, I post a lot on LinkedIn. If anyone follows on LinkedIn, are just ways of thinking about your relationship at least a little bit every week. You're not going to focus on it to the degree you do your business, because there are many more pieces to the business.
And the framework that you've developed. And I think that's really important. And I know that I've been guilty in the past of certainly as an entrepreneur, committing myself entirely to the business and not worrying so much about the relationship. And I think it's really important. But I do have a question for you. It just struck me as you were going through that. And I've seen this with some of the entrepreneurs that I work with as well. Often entrepreneurs do love a bit of structure, a bit of framework. When we give them the EOS tools, they get quite excited about the fact they can write a VTO, they can write their vision down, they can do all of that. But then they approach their marriage or their relationship with their husband, their wife, or their partner almost in the same kind of business sense. So like, right, we need to sit down, we need to have a meeting, we need to kind of work out what we're going to do. We're going to, and often I've seen, I've heard them kind of say, but she or he pushed back and said, but I'm not a business. I don't want to be treated like a business. So I'm keen for you to sort of share with me, how do you even approach this with your partner if you think maybe you do need to do some work without it feeling like you're just coming in at that typical entrepreneur bull at a gate? We're going to deal with this like a business issue.
I love that question, Deborah. Well, I think first of all is to start with your intention. Like I I really want us to be together, hand in hand, regardless of what this business does. Businesses often don't make it. Businesses will come and go. Maybe you sell it, maybe you start another one. But what you want as that consistent thread is that soft place to land, that partner, the person you fell in love with and envisioned a future together. So I think to keep it from feeling like a business meeting is to begin with maybe romance. And maybe I think we need a weekend away together. And as part of that, I would love for us to touch on some different areas, goals that we have, creating a vision together. Because when they have that shared vision, there's nothing that will stop them. But again, and I have a list, it's a list of questions that couples might ask in say, a vision setting. A lot of people do goals together at the beginning of the year, so that might be a very natural rhythm.
Mhm.
Our anniversary is in January, and so we typically will go away somewhere for a couple of days, and when our kids were young and we would take off for a weekend, it really wasn't anything we did like structured. We didn't have a list of questions like I have since put together for couples because sometimes couples don't know where to begin. So I've formed some questions if that's helpful. But you can also anymore in this day of chat GPT, you could say, could you create a vision, a set of questions to help us create this vision together? So we would go off for the weekend, and it was mostly fun and nice dinners or hiking or something fun we would do. But we, being the people that we are, always coming up with ideas, I I'm pretty sure that almost every one of those getaways, we came back with some business idea. And again, I didn't resent it because it never felt like Mark had an agenda. It was usually me asking those questions actually, because I tend to be the one that initiates some of these conversations. But Mark is I mean, we just get into these discussions and play off of each other. Um, so yeah, I would make it romantic first and then say, what would you think about maybe show them the list of questions. What would you add? What would you take away? And the reason I would like to do it is to make sure that I don't lose track of what's important to you. So by stating our intention and making it first about the relationship and about staying in touch with the other person, because I have seen this in some, they don't even have to be entrepreneur marriages, but let's just say some marriages where I've probably seen it more with the woman who maybe is more soft spoken and tends to get lost in the dreams and the ideas of their partner, who maybe is a little more um, expansive, excited. And so they get drawn into that energy. But at some point, they look around and they're like, I've lost who I am. I don't know what I want anymore, especially when there are kids involved. And if she is the primary caregiver, even when husbands are very involved, I still see this a lot with women that it's easy to lose themselves. Some of that is kind of personality based. Some personalities are a little more prone to that than others. Yeah, so I think having that intention of, I want us to get away, and I want to make sure that every year, at least once a year, we get away and we dream. We kind of step back and dream again. What's working? What's not working? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? I mean, even just simple questions like that. It doesn't have to be an EOS.
And actually, it's funny, it is the EOS format we always ask, and we review every quarter what's working, what's not working, So it's appealing to me. I'm kind of going, this makes perfect sense. But I think the thing that I've taken from that is it really is about setting the intention and I guess approaching, as you said, more from a romantic point of view and then asking permission as well, rather than just because I think, again, as entrepreneurs, we tend to be a bit bullish and we go in there kind of going, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do on the weekend, rah, rahs. But I love the way that you position that. It's like, how would you feel about doing this? And here are some questions I've uncovered. Is there anything missing? So actually having them involved in the process, it doesn't feel like it's forced upon them, but you're actually asking for them to be involved because of the intention of wanting to make the relationship better.
And better doesn't imply that it's bad. I think another thing that trips up a lot of couples is, and I'll hear this sometimes from men whose wife has set up an appointment with me, and it's like, we're not that bad. Well, come on, we're not that bad. It's like, no, you're right. You're right.
Stop
But
that
this
back.
is proactive. It's the difference between going to the gym and going to the cardiologist for open heart surgery.
Yes.
I'd rather go
Actually,
to the gym.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, Gino Wickman, who actually wrote Traction and obviously developed EOS, he talked about the fact one of the biggest things he ever did was to actually get a therapist for his own personal well-being as well. And sometimes we forget that we do need some help, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that you're broken, but it's just
Right.
an opportunity to be able to speak quite openly, to be able to share some of your thinkings and feelings and have a sounding board to bounce that off of. And I think that we see asking for help, going to a therapist, whatever it might be, as being, yeah, a sign that something is wrong. But
Mhm.
like you said, isn't it better to be preventative rather than, fall off the edge of the cliff? And
Yeah. There is a really interesting study that was done. I think it's Dr. Friedman. I think it's Friedman out of, I think it's UC Berkeley. Um, he wrote a paper called Touched with Fire,
yeah.
where he did surveys of, I won't recall off the top of my head, but of a number of entrepreneurs. The question, well, what they were trying to dig into is there more, are entrepreneurs different? Are there more mental health issues? And indeed, they found that there's more depression, there is more ADHD, more bipolar, either with the individual or in their families. And getting a therapist is not a bad idea because I think a lot of people, and then they put so much of their self-worth into their business and the success of that business, so that if something happens to that business or it doesn't make it or there's a, you know, downturn in the economy, they're devastated and they don't know how to do something beyond the business. So I think it's very important, not just to focus on your marriage, but by focusing on your marriage, you actually are focusing on yourself, because learning to love someone is not easy and it requires some adaptation. We don't change who we are, but we can adapt to another person, and we can learn to look for the best. Like, when a couple marries, I like to say there's me and there's you, but then there's a circle that forms around the two of you, and there's like a new entity called us. And so learning to consider decisions in light of what is best for us is a really profound step, I would say, for couples to make.
It says, I can't help but compare it to the business stuff. We always talk about the greater good of the business. We have to remove individual things. And like you said, we're not asking, we want everybody to work in their zone of genius and be in their zone of genius in their marriage and relationship too. But at times you have to say, but what is for the greater good of us, as opposed to
Yes.
the good of myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably a
Interesting.
lot of people have been kept in positions far longer than they needed to be, right? Because we didn't want to hurt their feelings, or whatever reason. But for the greater good of the business,
Yeah.
sometimes it is better to replace that person and find a better fit. So,
And so in terms of a marriage or relationship, you said that we don't want to, well, we can't fundamentally change who we are, can we? I mean, at the end of the
mm,
day, we are who we are, but the adjust, tell me a little bit more about that. What does that really mean? So adjusting to the us rather than the individual, that shouldn't mean that it goes against your core values or the
right.
fundamental personality of who you are, but it's just about considering the broader perspective. Is that true?
Right. I think that, so the first element of CRAVE being communication, there are so many communication, well, not so many tools, but there are some real fundamental tools that are important for clear communication. And what happens so often with couples is we defend without really letting the other person know why this thing is important. And sometimes maybe we don't really know ourselves. And so when there is a conflict, or especially when it's one of those, you know, a lot of couples have a conflict that comes up over and over. And maybe it's same song, second verse, maybe it's a little bit different variation, but it has a similar feel every time. And so we keep fighting up here on the surface instead of going a little deeper and asking, help me understand. Those are 3 words that will change your communication. Help me understand why this is important to you, because it's not making sense to me, or I don't understand it. And I want to understand why you're so adamant about saving money, let's say. And the other one's a free spender and wants to go travel the world. Again, those are values for each person, and you're not going to change them. Most conflict, I can't remember if I mentioned this last time or not, but most conflict, something like, I don't know, 80 something percent, is never resolved. It's managed.
Hmm.
And for that very reason, because it has to do with deeper our motivations, our values, or our personality. Let's say one person is very quiet and introverted, and their spouse is an extrovert and they like to go to all the parties and all the networking events. And they want to drag their spouse along, and the spouse is like, I can't. I just can't. And so the other one takes it personally. What, you don't want to be with me?
Hmm.
No, it's not about that. So we have to get to the why. Why is this important? Or
Yeah.
why do you not want to do this? And that takes some tools to be able to untangle those issues. I think that when we talk about us, that vision is what comes alongside that concept. What is the marriage that we want to have? What type of a life do we want to have? Do we want children? Do we not want children? Do we want to buy a home? Do we want to live on a boat? I mean, it's just an endless number of things that you could process together. And in the process of creating that vision, if you're clear about where you're going, then you have a clearer concept of us. And within that us, though, there is still a me. I am who I am. And I have, like, I love photography. My
Me too.
husband is a great Sherpa. He'll carry around my camera equipment. He
Yep.
loves to bird hunt. He loves to hunt. I'm in his office, and I don't know if you can see that there's an elk head behind me.
I
It's
can see
never a great,
the shadow. Yeah.
yeah, never a great background for these podcasts. But next week we're going to Montana to bird hunt, and I kid him and I say I always shoot something with my camera, even when he doesn't get anything. So but that's the give and take that has us as the overarching. I don't know. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that absolutely does. Yeah, no, that's good. And I suppose and often, of course, opposites do attract. And
Mhm.
I always joke that that I really wouldn't want another version of me to be in a relationship with me because it would be way too much like hard work. But
Yeah.
there can be differences in the way that we approach things, and so entrepreneurs are often, as you said, they've got ADHD, maybe some bipolar. They're very driven. They're very they do take a lot of things personally. They do get defensive, and I
Mhm.
see this in my clients. I see it in myself at times without really understanding why. I'm sure there's deeper stuff that goes way back to childhood or wherever it might be. But how do you balance those very, very different personality types in a relationship? Um, I mean, we're going into a lot more deeper stuff now, but yeah, just trying to understand how do we make sure that both people get heard and both people have
Mhm.
their needs met?
Yeah. Love that question also, Deborah. One of the things that I love to do with couples is I give them a version of the disc profile. Have
Oh,
you
yeah.
ever
Yes, so I'm
taken the
very much
disc?
a proponent. I have indeed, yes.
Hmm. I mean, I'm kind of an assessment geek. I love all of them, but
Yep.
I love disc because with the 4 dimensions, it's pretty easy to comprehend and understand what it's about. So I actually have a package called Uniquely Us. and I give the disc profile to both people, and then I do a combination report. And the disc taps into a person's a bit of their wiring, if you will. If you think of how your personality is, it's not an extensive personality test, but it does tap into aspects of our personality, how we go about doing things. And along with that, we have preferred communication patterns.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the S on the disc, well, disc is D is for dominance,
Yeah.
I is for influence, the S is um, steadiness, and C is compliance. And someone likened these to animals. So the D is a lion, the I is an otter, the S is the golden retriever, and the C is the beaver. So, for instance, if you have one that is a lion and one that is a golden retriever, the S, golden retrievers do not like conflict. They don't like to rock the boat. If you have one of them on your team at work, like one of the things you learn about communicating with them is to ask for their opinion. You don't wait for them to raise their hand because they often won't until you step on something or bring up a topic that they're very passionate about. And then you'll hear from them. So this applies whether it's a team, because I've used the disc with teams also. And it's very fascinating, especially there's a wheel that you can mark everyone on, and you get a real visual picture of where everyone is. But when it's a partnership, marriage, um, understanding how the other person is wired. I've had so many couples that go, in fact, last night I had a discovery call with a couple, and I mentioned this to them, and I mentioned what the C is, and they both looked at each other like, that's me. I mean, just with a short description. So it it takes away the temptation to make someone different, and instead, because I think one of the keys to a healthy relationship is to be curious about each other. Be curious about yourself also. Why do I get defensive when someone offers a different way of doing something? And I have a thought about that defensiveness with your business owners. I'll come back to that. So so that's a very simple tool that really has a big impact for couples of just taking that assessment and then looking at their comparison report. And then we talk about specific ways this person wants communication and ways you should not talk to them. Like, I'm a high I, and one of my don'ts is don't talk down to me. Oh, that will get me going faster
You're
than
triggered.
anything. Yes.
It's actually really interesting. I'm actually I'm a high D, but I'm an even higher I. I have absolutely zero S and very little C.
Not surprising. I
No.
probably could have
And
predicted
I think
that.
there's probably most entrepreneurs are very similar to that as well. And it's really challenging because I just don't get the puppy dog thing at all.
Right,
But
right.
but
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 that's
so
how
it do
you're wired,
yes,
and so
yeah.
that's not the only way that that changes
Mhm.
is when there's a traumatic event. Sometimes a person's behavioral style might change, but pretty much this, that's how you're wired and it's how you've always been. And as a woman, it's even more challenging being a high D.
Mm.
Do you feel like you've gotten that message sometimes like, Deborah,
Oh, you're too
just simmer
bossy.
down, just tone down, take your
Yeah.
seat, whereas we don't
Yeah.
say that to men.
No, I know it can be a little bit challenging. So look, this raised another really interesting question for me. I'm sure other people will have this too. Because we are generally quite curious as entrepreneurs, we're like, yes, I mean, I think I've done every test out there. Got the DISC, got the Enneagram, got the Colby, got the Myers-Briggs. I mean, I think I've taken a lot of time to learn about myself and also my team members as well. What if your partner is resistant to that because they sort of say, I don't want to be put in a box?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I've heard that a lot. I don't wanna be put in a box, and
Mm.
I usually just validate that and say, "You're right, no one wants to be in a box, and this doesn't define who you are." It's more like a revelation, and it can help us to see, especially the Enneagram is good about this because it's really designed as a self-growth, process.
Yep.
But even the disc, there are aspects that, we all have blind spots, and we don't wanna go looking for them, you know? But your potential for leadership is so much greater when those blind spots are revealed because the blind spots can destroy you if you don't, look at them. And the same is true in a marriage. So, if someone's resistant, I mean, you can't force them,
Yeah.
but you can maybe just take it yourself and say, "Do you mind if I share some of my results or my report with you? And I'd love to have your feedback about whether it sounds accurate or not." And then maybe they would be curious and go, "Well, okay, that was," because what I've had people say over and over is, "Oh my gosh, was somebody in my brain? How did this, you know, reveal me so accurately?"
Yeah. And it's interesting. I've been listening to the Let Them theory by Mel Robbins again, and the second part of the book talks about you can't. Well, she's talking about a friend who's got a husband who's particularly overweight, and she's trying to kind of force him to go to the gym, and like you cannot change anybody else's behavior apart from your own. And so what you said there is absolutely perfect. Is if you share your results, if you're excited by what's revealed for you, then maybe you shouldn't go into it with this intention, but maybe the other person will also get excited and want to do something about it. But you can't force it on them and say, "Well, I think we need to do this," because that's just gonna push them further away.
Sure. And,
Yeah.
you could always invite the question with something like, I mean, this is what I learned from my feedback. What is something you would like me to know about you that you think I don't know or
Ooh,
recognize?
like the Johari window, isn't it?
Mm.
And the blind spot, so it's wonderful. Okay, we talked a little bit about you're either growing together or you're drifting apart. Sometimes if we're very engrossed in our business, we might lose sight of when we are potentially drifting apart. Are there any easy signals we can look for and kind of go, okay, what are the early warning signs, if you like, the indicator light on the dashboard that says, "Oh,
Mm.
hold on a second, something's going on here," that we're starting to drift again?
Sure. Can we talk about sex on your podcast?
Absolutely.
I can put on my Esther Perel hat.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is a big one when couples begin, they are not intimate as often, which is such a powerful reconnector. And of course, not the only one. Other indicators, I would say irritability,
Mm.
becoming irritable with each other or finding that you're just, maybe you're very efficient. You're both getting a lot done. Check off that list,
Yep.
but there's no connection. There's no eye to eye. Tell me about what was good about your day. Um, Mark and I both read The Gap and the Gain
Oh, yes.
probably 2 years ago. And we often will, when we sit down for dinner, it's just become kind of a natural rhythm for us to say, "What were your wins today? Did you have 3 wins?" Some days, we're really one of us might be really having to dig, like, "It was just a crappy day. I can't find one." But maybe having dinner with you right now is a win. Yeah, when I think back to, the story that I shared in the first episode about our really low point, I you know, I I look back and thought we were pretty good. And I think that's where a lot of couples find themselves. They're like, "We're pretty good," until we're not. And it's sometimes it's like there's just the straw that breaks the camel's back. And that's what it was for us. It was just I had felt unappreciated for a very long time, and he was just so empty and exhausted that I don't think he could even recognize what he needed. I observed that he was very irritable. That's not his personality, his typical persona. I think a lot of times women are a little more tuned in to when there are subtle changes and they bring it up to their partner who maybe really hasn't thought about it. And again, they're not being unkind or unloving. It just really hadn't even crossed their mind. And so I think the key to a long-term marriage is number 1 that it's long term. I just wrote my email letter tonight and wrote about how it's very much like running. 2 of our kids have done ultra trail runs, not just marathons. Or I'm talking in the mountains, up and down. Our son did they call it the dirty double. He ran a 60K on Friday and no, yeah, 60K and then 100K the next day for a total of 100 miles. But I talked about how they have a pacer. They allow a pacer for about the last 13 minutes and how we need that in our marriage because marriage is it's a long if you want a long-term marriage, then you have to know that there are times that that we don't feel as romantic or as inspired or 10 years into the marriage it it feels maybe more connected and deeper than it did at the beginning, but it also has a different type of passion or connection. And we can't expect it to be the same all the way through, but it can be better. I found one question I think that is helpful is how would you rate our marriage in a couple of different areas, maybe intimacy, maybe conversation, maybe recreational fun. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate us? 10 being couldn't be any better. I asked my husband that once on a hike, and he was quiet for a very long time. I was like, "Okay, time's up. Is it that bad?" And he said, "No, I've just kind of been going through the different areas, knowing that there's almost always room for improvement." And I thought, bingo, buddy. That's why I married you. But I think taking that approach and saying, could we be 5% better?
Hmm.
Again, in business, do you accept your business being just okay?
Yeah.
No, you always have growth goals. Could always be 5% better.
I'm really loving this. I know that other entrepreneurs because it really is very, very similar to the way that we approach business. It's about taking those principles and kind of using them in your relationship with,
Mm,
but in a softer way, I think, not quite so driven and more about sort of, taking time to understand. We know as entrepreneurs that, there's definitely some very high stress times, when you're going through a growth in a business. I always talk about there's two part, you're either going through growth and you're going so fast the wheels are falling off, or when you're getting ready to exit, right? When you're getting to ready to exit, that is also a very stressful part. What do we need to do to protect our relationship in those really high stress environments?
yes, those will definitely come. And I think that part of the key is having that strong foundation and being naming it. Like there is something very powerful about naming a season. Like, look, we know we're in a season of growth and it's going to be crazy. And I'm not sure how long it's going to be. And so then it's maybe a conversation about how do we stay connected during this time? Because that is the reality of business. I think that's why I'm so passionate about this intersection is because so many are unprepared for that season of, 110% is going to the business. so that the other one doesn't resent it. So I think there are many ways to do, small things. Something as small as I think I might have mentioned this last time, but like a 20-second hug. There's research that shows a 20-second hug. I mean, time it if you need to. It's really not very long,
Yep.
but just that process, say first thing in the morning, is just such a softening and connecting, and both people can just kind of let their nervous system relax a little bit, be centered before they get into their day. So I think there are many little things that can be done. A midday text. Hey, I'm thinking about you. How's your day going? I mean, how long does that take?
Yeah.
Literally less than a minute. If you don't have time for a minute, then you really do have a problem.
And I was just thinking with my entrepreneur's hat on as well, it's like actually, you can use tools and things to actually help remind you. I mean, I
Yeah.
think people think it has to be spontaneous, but actually, no, you
Mhm.
can you can use your VA, you can use your reminders on your computer to actually remind you because it doesn't take very long.
Right.
But sometimes we just get caught up in everything that's going on and we forget. But I think the key thing I've just taken from that is it's around the communication. I think sometimes we know that we're going through this really horrible, stressful time, everything's going on, but we just never actually taken the time to explain that to our other half around
Mhm.
what is actually going on. And I suppose just that there's the C of, the communication and CRAVE is around just actually highlighting it. We're going to be going through this really, really stressful growth period right now. As you said, I don't know how long it will go for. Um, just a heads up and letting the other person know.
There's a woman named Trisha Harp who she did her I think it was her graduate thesis looking at entrepreneur couples and what differentiated healthy couples from those that weren't doing so well. And one of the things that she concluded was how much information is shared about the business. And so I think that's a conversation, an important conversation as part of communication. How much do you want to know?
Yeah.
And and Mark and I were talking about this just last week because we've been in, as I said before, we're rebuilding. So he's running a business. He's also a part time CEO for another business. So it's cuckoo. And we were kind of getting into that pattern again of that's all we talk about was the business or the bulk
Mm,
of what we talk about. And said the other day, I said, I really need for us to try having a set time that we talk about business. Now, certainly, if something comes up that you need to process, by all means, I'm all ears. But I don't want to be talking about it every single day or the only thing that we talk about. I do want to know what's going on. There are some spouses who don't want to know,
mm,
and that's harder. It makes the entrepreneur feel very isolated. And I've had actually more women I've heard from whose partner is, say, a, a W 2, employee. So they get a paycheck. They don't have much appetite for risk, and they really don't understand what their wife does. And the wife feels very alone in that. And I've suggested some ways that they might invite them to be a partner with them without carrying the risk or, if there are parts they don't want to know about, then respect that. But to also say, I need your support and this is what it could look like and be very
yeah.
specific about what you need. Maybe I just need you to ask me what the highlight of my day was or what
Yeah.
is something that I'm carrying right now. I don't expect you to fix it, but it means a lot to me to know that you might be able to at least let me offload it a little bit.
And I think there's real merit in having a structured time that you agree upon, whether, and you agree on the frequency, you agree on how long it's for and what you want to know and understand in that. But it does mean that you're not, as you said, always talking about business. But it means you've got, I don't know, and I call it an agenda because I can't help myself. I'm a business person, but having an understanding of the things that you do need to cover off, so the other so both people feel comfortable that they've got that outlet, but it's not bleeding into every part of your life, because sometimes it can be all consuming.
Right. Yeah, the tool that I created, that it's the weekly marriage compass, and it's
Oh yeah.
about a 30-minute um, process. Very short questions, but one of them is what is coming up in your week that I need to know about or that I can support you in, you know. It might turn into a longer discussion, but it doesn't have to. It can
Yeah.
just be that much of just touching base. And so again, it's that regular and intentional tuning into your partner,
Yeah.
and also letting your own needs be known, that keep couples connected.
Gosh, I really wish I'd met you a year ago. Would have been very, very helpful. But anyway, it's a bit late for that now. Hey, look, I find this whole subject fascinating. I think the more and more we delve into it, the more and more I realize that there are lots of things that, I think as business people, we can easily adopt because it's not so dissimilar to business. But I think that we perhaps think it's a little bit more challenging than business, which is our natural bent. But we have limited time, and I
Yeah.
know that you have prepared 3 top tips or tools for us. So I'm really keen to hear what your 3 top tips and tools for the listeners are.
So
Yeah.
the three are, the first one is start small.
Mm.
Don't overhaul everything at once. Just pick one simple rhythm. Maybe it's a monthly date night that is non negotiable and there is no business talk. And just, put that on the calendar for once a month. I find that entrepreneurs are, they're voracious learners oftentimes. And it's like, give me the whole enchilada, it's like, no, just because that's how we change things. And again, just like going to the gym, you don't go in and start lifting 100-pound weights, you work up to it. So start with one thing, make that part of your relationship until it, like when you don't do it, then you miss it. You recognize, oh gosh, we haven't had date night in 3 months. That's what's missing. We need to set this up again. So start small, because small steps rebuild connection without overwhelm. And I say all the time that it's the small, consistent steps that you could think of it like a bank account. It's like building up your bank account. The second thing would be to stay consistent. So anchor your relationship in daily, weekly rhythms. Again, something like that 20-second hug. It could be coffee together with the question, what do you have on your calendar today? Or what do you have going on that I need to know about? Or how can I support you today? Just that simple. So rather, it goes from both people having their coffee or tea and reading the paper or checking email before they leave the house to a moment of connection. Simple. Consistency matters much more than the grand gesture. I sometimes see people who, they try to take this big expensive trip, or they buy a big expensive piece of jewelry for Christmas to make up for the year. And that's not what most of us want. The third thing would be to think strategically about your marriage. Just as you would not build a business without a plan, don't leave your marriage on autopilot. A simple framework like CRAVE can provide a blueprint so that your relationship grows stronger even through these hard seasons. And so those three things: start small, stay consistent, and be intentional. Have a plan, think strategy.
I love it. Hey, look, it's really obvious to me that this is something you're very, very passionate about, but you also have a huge amount of knowledge. Some of the research and things you shared, that's been really helpful to us. If people want to find out more about the work that you do, get hold of the CRAVE framework, maybe even the weekly marriage compass, those sort of things, how do they find that, please, Kathy?
Yes, so my website is kathyrushing.com, and that's Kathy with a K.
Mhm.
I'm on LinkedIn, Kathy Rushing. You can just search my name, and I'd love to connect with anybody that has listened or would love to get into the DMs there. Most of us don't want to talk about our marriage in public, and I totally understand that. So I always invite people into the DMs, or they can email me at info@kathyrushing.com. And I'd love to talk. I offer a free 30-minute consultation to anybody. If they just want to check in briefly and kind of see where their marriage is at and see how it could be 5% better. I'd love to have that conversation with them. And I've loved having this time with you, Deborah, and love the questions that you ask. They're so thoughtful, and I hope it's been helpful to your listeners. And just, if it lets them begin to think about their marriage at least as much as they do their business, I think it would change their life.
I agree. And as you said, it's one of the most important relationships. I think there's also some studies I can't quote exactly who from, but if you have a strong partner in behind you, you are generally more successful in
Oh,
business as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
beautiful. Hey, look, thank you once again for your time. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Learned a lot, taken a bucket load of notes as always, and I will make sure that those links and things are in the podcast notes for people who want to get hold of that too. So, Kathy,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much for your time.
Thank you, Deborah.